Make minoxidil great again! Or rather, in this case, make topical minoxidil great again. In this particular video, it's going to be kind of exciting because I usually talk about other people's studies, and today we're going to be talking about a study that I commissioned through my company, Folligens. That's Folligenz. And this might be the first ever study conducted with minoxidil sulfate, its absorption, and whether or not in a liposomal format it can actually pass through the outer layer of skin. And for the first time ever in literature, we conducted the world's first ever Raman spectroscopy, dermal mapping of minoxidil sulfate in this liposomal format. So why might this be significant? Well, conventional minoxidil absorption studies that typically look at ethanol, minoxidil, and propylene glycol formulations, they only use a Franz diffusion cell model, where they're using pig ears, and they're essentially trying to see how much of the minoxidil actually passes into the pig ears. But in our study, using minoxidil sulfate, we're actually looking at real human subjects, and we're mapping actual tissue structures in these live human subjects using a very sophisticated and pretty neat technology. So I'll give you a quick crash course on what Raman spectroscopy actually does. So Raman spectroscopy in dermatology is an advanced and non-invasive optical technique that creates a molecular fingerprint inside of the skin tissue, analyzing how a specific molecule scatters when it's exposed to light. Now, all you need is some kind of tracker, and in this case, you need the fingerprint of minoxidil sulfate. And you can use this technology to track in which layer does this minoxidil sulfate, or pretty much any other molecule, or even cell type in some conditions or hormones, where they would be inside that layer of the tissue. So once again, we're using this very sophisticated technology to prove this being the case. So we're proving that, yes, the minoxidil sulfate in this liposomal formulation is actually crossing the outer skin barrier. Now, we hired a third-party company in China to do this. This company is known as a CRO. And when it comes to clinical trials, CROs stand for Contract Research Organizations. The name of the company is Center Testing International Group Co. Ltd., and it's based in Shenzhen, China. And it's actually one of the largest CRO firms in the Asia-Pacific region. The particular Raman spectroscopy tool that they used was the RZ660 In-Vivo Raman Analyzer. And the report is currently in draft form, but I'm here to just present it to you guys right now as it is. And I have to reiterate, this is the first confocal Raman spectroscopy penetration study ever performed on topical minoxidil sulfate formulation in living human tissue. So this study was pretty small. It enrolled 3 female subjects ages 28 to 37 with intact Fitzpatrick II to III skin types. A single application of minoxidil sulfate in the liposomal form was placed on the inner forearm, and this is the standardized regulatory method used across the entire industry for this kind of cutaneous penetration work. Spectra were collected at baseline, 1 hour, 2 hours, and 4 hours post-application, scanning to a depth of 60 micrometers below the skin surface. So, what were the headline findings in this study? Minoxidil sulfate in the liposomal form crosses the outer skin barrier pretty rapidly and continues to populate progressively in deeper tissue layers beyond the stratum corneum, and that is the outer layer of the skin. So it's actually making its way towards the opening of the follicular route, also known as the paleosebaceous unit. So by the 1 hour mark, the signal had already cleared the stratum corneum. By 2 hours, the signal extended deeper into the viable epidermis, and by 4 hours, the signal reached a depth band that corresponds anatomically to the opening of the paleosebaceous unit, like I mentioned before. When you look at the false color depth maps, they kind of tell the same visual story. So remember, this Raman spectroscopy machine is going to light up and show a different gradient depending on the signal it detects. So at baseline, you see a uniform blue background, pretty much being no signal, and then warming bands of signal at 1 hour, and progressively, these warming bands extend deeper into the tissue layer, creating a more intense signal at 2 and 4 hours. So specifically speaking about this particular formulation, this might be the case where after 2 hours or maybe upwards to 4 hours, you can wash your scalp. And I think I touched on this earlier, but in other sort of studies where they use Franz diffusion cells, you're not getting a clear mapping of the tissue strata. You're not getting any of that, where in this study that we commissioned, you are. And you're also getting the concentration at each depth that we sensed. So it would be more expensive to run this study for 24 hours. The main endpoint was to see whether or not, again, it was going to cross the stratum corneum, and now that that's been confirmed, there's no point in going beyond that. Now, don't get me wrong, we still do plan on commissioning more studies, but that's kind of expensive, and really, our sales have been helping us conduct more studies, and we've been saving up more money to do so. So once again, this is the first, at least to our knowledge, the first ever Raman spectroscopy study concerning liposomal minoxidil sulfate. We also have some other study drafts concerning the stability testing, which is 1 year stability. We did 1 month accelerated stability test and also 3 month to 5 month accelerated stability tests. And the data came back between 8 months to 12 months of shelf life stability for the formulation at room temperature. So that's some big news. And also we did some heavy metal testing. The heavy metal concentrations were below detection limits, so this includes cadmium, mercury, lead, and total arsenic. These metals were not detectable. Microbial counts, which includes aerobic bacteria, mold, and yeast, Staphylococcus aureus, and other sort of bacteria, these were all within or below the cosmetic regulatory limits. The pH was stable at 4 to 4.1 across the time points, and the appearance and color and odor remained consistent. So again, we don't want to overpromise too much. You can look at the literature for yourself, particularly when it comes to Dr. Ralph Trüeb. There were 2 clinical observations that directly examine what happens when you skip the sulforotransferase bottleneck and simply apply minoxidil sulfate directly. In a Swiss retrospective cohort paper presented at the 2017 European Academy of Dermatology and Venereology Congress by Chang, Hagel, and the man himself, Dr. Ralph Trüeb, it referenced a 44-patient study where those who could not get any sort of results from topical minoxidil, 5%, switched to 10% minoxidil sulfate solution once daily. Across a mean treatment duration of just 4 months, 97.7% of those patients showed observable hair growth improvements. A larger, more recent observational study from that same group, published by Ralph Trüeb in the International Journal of Trichology in 2023, examined 50 female patients with female pattern hair loss who had previously failed conventional 5% topical minoxidil treatment. They then switched to 5% minoxidil sulfate solution, and from there, after 3 to 6 months, about 70% had improvement. So you can see between the 2 papers, there's a bit of a difference. The 10% led to what seems to be 97.7% becoming responders. And really, for the 5% concentration, although the study does say a total response rate of 92%, those that had a cosmetically significant result was only in the 70% range. So we're really looking at 70% versus 97.7% between those 5% and 10% groups. But I can't say that these directly map one-to-one with sulfogens, but sulfogens is related, especially when it comes to those cosmetically significant results. So that's pretty much it. That's the rundown, and hopefully this has been informative. And you can join the Phologens Discord server. I'll put a link in the description below, and there you can talk to actual customers who are using sulfogens. Well, that's pretty much it for this video, and thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. And hopefully, I'll be involving myself more in commissioning studies, right? Studies are expensive. This one was pretty expensive, although it was 3 subjects. It would have been more expensive to do it in the United States, but we decided to do it in China because it's cheaper, but still, it was a pretty penny. But in any case, I've signed some other NDAs on projects that I'm going to be involved with some big companies. So it's going to be exciting for the next couple of months, and hopefully you guys can stick with me. The posting frequency might go down a bit, but hey, I'm all for that, as long as I can contribute in this space in some way. So thanks for watching, and peace out. Bye.